Okay, great. So thanks everybody for joining us for another credit issues working group of the Equity Advisory Group. As I mentioned previously to Ben, but you may not have all heard, our main facilitator, Shira, is not with us today, so that's going to be my job. I will definitely try to be responsive to public comment. In the past, we've had Rick or Ken, if he joins from the tag, jump in to do clarification, but otherwise I think we'll keep public comment to specified open periods. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else we need to cover. Oh yeah, as always, helpful if EAG members can keep their cameras on to facilitate discussion and microphones off when we're not talking, and everyone else to stay off camera unless they're making a public comment. Great, thanks. Okay, let's talk about, we don't have a really formal agenda in place, so I'll cover a few things I think that this group would benefit from discussing in advance of our next full EAG meeting. So those are a draft recommendation on front-loading credits, which Ben drafted after our meeting last time, and I was able to provide some comments on. So hoping to get that memo in a pretty finalized state so that we are comfortable bringing it before the full EAG next time. So this is a good opportunity to try to make any edits or any updates we think are going to be valuable for the full group. And then I also took a stab in at getting some of our thoughts about the default delivery agent recommendations for what that organization or organizations should be prepared to do to advance equity issues. So that isn't as fleshed out as I think it needs to be for the full group. So that's another one where I'm hoping we're making good progress and can bring it back. And then, finally, there's quite a number of filings and the draft potential study, both of which I think are going to have, impacts on how we think about equity and credit issues. I don't know if Emily, Ben, you have any thoughts on how to structure that conversation or what you want to tackle. I guess I propose that we tackle our two memos first because those are more deliverables, and then sort of the following issues on the potential study and the recent filings, I guess we can take as we go. Does that sound good?
Sounds good, yeah.
That sounds good to me.
Okay, great. I am going to pull up the memo on credit front loading, and bear with me while I try to share my screen on that, and then we can make any edits. Emily, apologies, I sent this with got so much stuff right here. I sent this along to EAG members, but it was a little bit late. I thought Ashir was going to send it out, but I think we had some miscommunications. So is everyone able to see this memo that I have up in front? Okay, great. And let me just... Okay, so yeah, and Emily, I'm not sure if you've had the chance to read it, but Ben basically, and you weren't in our last credit issues meeting, but basically, I think the gist of this memo is really that we anticipate that the PUC will ask us about front loading sometime in the next couple weeks. They have not yet, but it's always been a challenge to get this through our group of the bi-weekly EAG meetings and get this. So I'm hoping to be proactive and get some comments on front loading. And I think we should go through the whole thing, but I think the gist of it that we had last time was that we don't have enough information on what the current marketplace, or I guess what the current activities are taking place and what that would mean in a market for us to make a meaningful decision about front loading. But that we think it's going to be challenging, and that we think the PUC should keep that in mind for a future period. I think we can discuss the specifics to try to do front loading in some capacity to advance equity if and when that becomes feasible. So I'll just go through this, So I think one of the things we discussed last time was basically the idea that we felt that the 5 credit categories that the PUC proposed would be important to facilitate front loading, because we expect the cost of doing low income activities, especially low income and moderate income installed measures are going to be very different than delivered measures. So we think that if the PUC is going to carry out front loading, then having those different types of credit obligations seems like something that would be important for that. And I think, Emily, I don't know if you have anything you'd want to add to that discussion, but this is what we talked about last time.
I have not yet read this.
I know
so
it was
apologies.
it was close to this. I'm sorry.
No apologies needed. Right now I don't have anything to add, but I'll see if I have any feedback as I start to get more familiar with this.
Yeah, absolutely. And this will be brought for the full EAG to comment on as well. But if there's anything we can do today to iron out any issues, I think that'll help smooth this out. And then, the thing that I added as part of, Ben's memo, Ben did a great job, by the way, of just sort of explaining the background and sort of the challenges we think we're going to encounter with front loading. And one thing I wanted to add, which I think could potentially be fleshed out, is basically we don't know some information right now that we think will be critical to determining whether credit front loading is even possible. So I added some additional ideas about, things I think we need to know if we're going to know if front loading is feasible. And so that's basically, and this would be helpful, Ben, Emily, if you have thoughts on the language, but I basically described this as the percentage of low and moderate installed measures currently being produced relative to all clean heat measures. And I don't know if produced is the right word for that, because you do have early action credits and you just have like things that are being generally done right now. So that's how I characterized it in this memo of just understanding, the marketplace. And Ben is doing a little bit of side analysis right now to get a better sense of, at least on weatherization and potentially heat pumps, depending on what the department has access to try to characterize, like, even in those sort of smaller slices of the market, which we know are going to be part of a larger market that includes delivered fuels and commercial industrial, we'd like to have a better sense of how that's shaking out in the residential sector. And I think, based on what we kind of did some back of the envelope math, it looks like the low income percentage is fairly small right now. And that's, would be even smaller if you consider the whole market. So I think we'd like to add that to our analysis. I don't know if, Ben, you think you'll have a chance to take a look at that before the next EAG meeting.
Yeah, in terms of actually adding data to this, you're saying? Yeah.
And just as a comment about like what limited characterization of the market we have now.
Yeah, I think so. I think I could probably get some language in there. But yeah, basically what you alluded to is that, yeah, trying to get a sense of, what is really what the landscape kind of looks like now in terms of the measures being, I guess, in terms of I was just thinking about the language you had here. You had, installed measures currently being produced. I guess you could say currently being delivered, but there, there are also delivered measures. So, yeah, I guess, yeah, the install measures being produced, I guess, could work for now. But yeah, trying to get a sense of like what basically what percentage of the low and moderate income population that is eligible, for the weatherization program, for example, which is 80% AMI and lower. What percentage of that population has been served by that program, over the last 15 years? 15 years is the window in which the weatherization program essentially looks backwards. So if you have been weatherized by the weatherization program, OEO, this is the OEO weatherization assistance program. If you've been essentially served by that program the past 15 years, you're not eligible to reapply for additional services. But if it has been 16 years, beyond the 15-year mark that you were last served, you can then reapply to the program. So looking back 15 years, trying to get a sense of how many of those households have been served by that program, and then what remains to be weatherized essentially or served. So that is kind of where I started that analysis, but and looking into other metrics we can kind of tease out to try to get some data to support our thinking on this. So that's where I was coming from there, Emily, on that. But Yeah, so I think I could probably, I'm got to do some QC on the data that I'm working with and stuff to be sure. But I think initially, from what I'm looking at, it looks like there's, quite a bit of room for the low income population to be, that have not been weatherized over the past 15 years. It looks, initial numbers suggest that only about 20% of the low income population have been weatherized by the weatherization program in the past 15 years. So quite a few Vermonters have not been able to take advantage of that program recently. So.
Yeah, and then Matt, just to get you caught up, we're talking about this credit front loading memo to try to get it in good enough shape to discuss at the full EAG group, just because we don't know when the commission is going to ask us for feedback, but it takes a couple cycles to get it through our full EAG meeting. So this is something that Ben drafted and I added comments to. I did send it to the EAG members, but it was fairly recently today because I didn't realize that it had not already been sent. So we're just sort of discussing where we are. And then after we discuss this and a potential memo on the DDA qualifications, we were then going to try to make time to talk about the recent filings and draft potential study. So this is what we're tackling first. Great. So yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this sort of unknown information that's in the memo is kind of academic. Like, I don't know when they're going to have this, but what I tried to point out in this memo is basically saying understanding what's happening right now in the market and any sense of cost is going to be helpful to determine when and if front loading credit obligations for low and moderate income households is going to be reasonably possible. And understanding the cost will be pretty key to make sure that this doesn't really negatively impact the market and increase costs faster than they would have otherwise. So, I don't know if this is, like I said, kind of an academic or sort of wish list for when it's possible for the PUC to make any decision about front loading, but having an informed one will be, I think, really hard without this unknown information. And then I added some recommendations that, again, I think we should all get into agreement on, but I think were things we had touched on last time, which, our recommendations, I think, have been that at this point, the EAG believes that there's not enough information to determine whether front-loading obligations in the earliest years of the program is reasonably possible, as Act 18 suggests. But I think we've all agreed that if front loading were sort of believed to be reasonably possible, this is something that would be valuable for equity concerns. And so, I basically suggest that that the PUC should consider one, that the credit percentage could be approached moderately, like a small percentage to like 18% rather than doubling it. And again, that's very arbitrary, but recognizing that they could still have positive impacts without doubling or tripling those obligations in the earliest years. And then one thing I added to this, which we didn't discuss, but I thought might be worthwhile for us, is that I think it's possible that they could approach installed measures separately because we think that would have the greatest benefit. So you could increase the obligation for installed measures without increasing a requirement for low and moderate income delivered measures. That's another thing that I think the PUC could consider doing, but again, is similarly difficult without our better understanding of the market. And then, finally in the recommendation section, I said that the commission should revisit front loading no earlier than the second DDA budget and planning process, at which point we should know. And then I just noted that in the unlikely event that this becomes knowable, sure, go for it. But that it seems unlikely that this will be the sort of unknown information I listed up there would be known, before the market is really launched. So I'd love comments on ways that we can make this, memo more agreeable to the group, both, EG members on this call and the full group, so that when the PUC asks us, we're kind of ready to go. So Matt, Ben, Emily, if you have any thoughts on kind of what I put there and if there's areas of disagreement.
Yeah, Mia, did you say that, hold on one second. Did you say that you would put a different priority over installed measures versus other measures?
Yeah, the text is, can you see the screen? The text is right here. It says, this is what
I
I've
can.
proposed. Okay, are you not able to see it at all, or is it like too small?
I'm just on a phone.
Oh, okay. So this is the language I said, which I think could be changed if needed. But I said the commission could consider increasing some credit requirements individually. The EAG feels that installed measures will have far more immediate and direct benefits for LMI households than delivered measures. The commission could potentially increase that requirement while leaving generic requirements from LMI households unimpacted. And it's just something to think about that I think they should consider. But if there's
So I don't think they consider it. I don't think they can, and I don't think it's true. So I would remove it entirely.
Well, let's talk about that. So
Sure.
they said that the Act 18 doesn't say how you could front load requirements. It just says that the PUC shall if reasonably possible. So I don't see anything in Act 18 that means that you couldn't take out the installed percentage and consider it separately from the overall percentage. I don't think they have to be considered jointly under Act 18 necessarily.
Okay, well, I'll be filing a minority report if the EAG decides to pass that, disagreeing with that point.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, well, this memo is going to get hopefully voted on by the full EAG so we can submit it to the PUC. So I think it's ideal if we can all get into agreement.
Well, count me as a no if you leave that in there.
Well, I mean, can we discuss this as part of, what we're doing in this working group? I mean, so do you think that the installed portion of the LMI requirements is like unseverable from the delivered measures requirements, or do you object to it for some like different reason beyond?
Well, I think you're working on an assumption that installed measures are superior in some way for LMI than delivered measures. I don't think we know that to be true.
Well, I mean, so yeah, I think that's what we should drill down to as part of this discussion. I mean, yeah, I think installed measures will have more benefits. I think there's a large
that's subjective. That's completely subjective.
Okay, well, let's talk about, so this is my opinion in terms of, I think that biofuels and delivered fuels have a benefit to, society in general. I think that an average household receiving the installed measures in their home will benefit more directly than having a different percentage of their fuel be, biofuels or less carbon intensive fuels. I'm not sure the right way to phrase that, but yeah, so I do think installed measures do have a more direct benefit on households and have more equity issues like in the short term. I guess like where do you see a disagreement with that?
You're suggesting that we assess a different credit value regardless of whether or not if two things reduce greenhouse gas emissions by the same, one should receive more credit than the other. It's fundamentally unequitable.
No, I'm not saying more credit. So right now there is already a different obligation. So right now the Act 18 says that you need to get a certain percentage of credits from low and moderate income households, regardless of those credits greenhouse gas reducing value. So I think and that half of those need to be installed measures. So already Act 18 isn't blind to whether measures are installed or delivered. They're already putting criteria in that. So I think that's already in the mix and part of our assumptions.
But by not allowing the lowest cost greenhouse gas reducing credit measure to be equally available, you're in fact increasing the cost on fossil for that same group of people that we're trying to help. So if you're installing a $5,000 or $6,000 piece of equipment in somebody's home that you're having to have to pay for the whole thing, you're increasing the cost of the fee for fossil fuel, of which some percentage of low and moderate income Vermonters will have to pay. It is in effect inequitable, what you're suggesting.
But this is already part of the clean heat. So are you saying that the 16 and 16%
the EAG may say, you gave us something that is inequitable. It cannot be resolved. That's what we're coming to grips with.
I don't think the EAG as a group, as a whole, is going to say that they think the legislature should do away with the 16% and 16% LMI requirements. Like, I don't think
No,
that's
I don't think so either. But we
okay.
could say the clean heat standard is an inequitable energy policy, and it should not persist.
Okay, I mean, I think that is somewhat separate from the idea of front loading. Like, I don't, I mean, this is the credit issues group. We can have this discussion in the full EAG. I guess I just think like we aren't working with a system that just says go out and do stuff to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Like the legislature has chosen to say that some of those should be installed and some of them should go to low income households. So in that framework, I was basically just suggesting that should the PUC decide to increase the obligations rather than just doubling LMI obligations, you could just double the installed one, or not even double. You could just increase the installed versions separately. I don't think they should necessarily do this if front loading in general is unfeasible, but it was a path forward to do some sort of partial approach rather than doing a dramatic increase or just, I mean, I don't know that not doing any LMI obligations is on the table based on what's in Act 18. I don't know, Emily or Ben, do you have any thoughts on how we should think about this more globally?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I would say is that I think what I take my takeaway from this paragraph here that's highlighted is the suggestion that PUC could increase the installed measures requirement for LMI. I think that would be basically we talked about it prior is would have to be supported by data. And I think, for example, I could see this working potentially if you had, a program like the weatherization program, for example, which is going to, which serves solely low-income population. They do primarily or only installed measures, CHS, eligible measures. So let's say they're, the early action credits come out and basically the amount of credits that they're producing is a good amount. Then they could basically, and there's basically a glut of low income credits initially on the market. You could have basically more installed measures available for obligated parties to acquire through that program. And thereby, you could say, okay, we're going to increase the requirement for the installed measure there. I think, separating it out from the delivered fuels, yeah, I mean, that's the only situation where I think I could see that working. I mean, I see where Matt's coming from on that for sure. Because on paper, you have an installed measure and then you have a delivered measure. They're both reducing greenhouse gases. So you wouldn't want to basically, if you were to increase the requirement on one and not the other, you could, create inequities in the marketplace, by, putting the finger on the scale, so to speak. So yeah, I definitely see where you're going with this one. I do have trouble. I mean, I think it does fit in with the broader theme of this memo is what we're trying to say is that, having the 5 credit categories and in effect, 5 different, price points for each credit does, can bring some complexity to the marketplace. But I think the through line here is that it in effect makes it abundantly clear which marketplace obligated parties are dealing in. If you have a completely separate low income installed price from market rate, there is no confusion as to what credit is being traded or acquired in any given transaction, because it's like a totally separate market price or category for the credit. So yeah, I mean, yeah, they both have societal benefits though, from a carbon perspective. So yeah, I guess I see where you're coming from, Mia, for sure. But I mean, to Matt's point, it's like, how this will actually play out it's a good point.
Yeah, can I just say something that it's really been on my mind for a while, which is we're doing what we're asked to do, and Mia is doing a great job. I really believe that, Mia. You are.
Thanks.
This is a lot. But from someone who represents and works with and knows the people who will be installing these devices and trading credits and those that will have to be buying credits. Each layer of complexity that we put on this policy ensures that it will not run as we want it to. And I think there is value. And yes, we're the EAG, and yes, we have a very specific task. But I think there is a value either as a group or at least individually, and I know I'm going to do it individually, that if we want a program to work successfully, we have to simplify it greatly. And I'm worried about these credit values, which you talk to the average heat pump installer, and I know lots of them, and they're scratching their head trying to figure out how they're going to take this thing that they do that they know is good, helping people get more efficient air conditioning and efficient heat, and how to trade it to a company. The company is trying to figure out, how am I going to buy something in order to be in that compliance range, and who do I buy it from, and how much is it going to cost? These layers of complexity that we're adding to it because we want to make sure it's equitable, that we want to make sure that the best things are being done, will in fact harm I think our ultimate goal, which is to increase the amount of clean heat measures installed. And I think if we just left it as, if the PUC views this service and this fuel and this piece of equipment have the same amount of greenhouse gas reduction, yes, we will require a third of it, 16% to low income and 16% to low and moderate income. But as long as we're reducing greenhouse gas emissions, that for them to decide which, pick and choose which item should be used in specific things, we're adding a layer of complexity that it's impossible to enforce. It's impossible to understand, particularly by the people who are out there in vans and trucks and pipe wrenches just trying to do the work.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair, and I do take that to heart. I think the problem that I'm struggling with, that we should, like, it seems like, I think Ben said, like, putting our finger on the scale. Like, it feels like the finger's already on the scale. Like, this is already immensely complex. A lot of the obligations are going to be really challenging for the average obligated party, person delivering fuel to understand. And I think figuring out where our equity concerns are in the midst of that is really challenging. Like, I think we're adding complexity to Matt's point. I don't know that we've added complexity in a way that wasn't already in this system. I think by putting these sort of LMI obligations in there, it significantly increased the complexity. But on the other hand, I think that getting rid of those would mean that almost no benefits and no transformative benefits would go to low-income households, or not almost none, but like comparatively much less. So I do get what you're saying, Matt, but I think that we're kind of in this, we're trying to make more fair rules for a very complicated system. So I guess I just disagree that we're necessarily adding unworkable to complexity beyond what's already in there. So that's where I kind of come down on this. Like, if I worry that if we just say it's too complicated and difficult, someone is going to do this anyways without the things that we think would increase equity. So I agree with you. I don't disagree. I'm just saying, like, if these are the rules that we understand they're following, I think this is the best way forward. But if they're going to do something else, then that's a different discussion, I guess. That's kind of where I'm landing on some of this.
And just to clear the air, in case I garbled my words, I'm not suggesting at all that the EAG or anyone else, I certainly won't urge the legislature to change the statute and change the 1/3. Quite the opposite. I think more should go to low and moderate income Vermonters, not less. It's just figuring out which clean heat measures, again, in a world in which two measures reduce greenhouse gas emissions the exact same, that we're adding another layer of, but this is worth slightly more, even though it does the exact same thing from a greenhouse gas perspective.
Yeah, Emily.
I don't think I have any conclusions on this. I think that for me, it would be helpful to start to kind of outline what those benefits might be in more specific detail. And then to Matt's point, to understand what maybe the consequences might be to this. So yeah, I think this could be, if we have time in the EAG to, like, when we introduce this, to focus in on this point, and make sure we have time to discuss this with the larger group. I think this feels like an important thing to talk about as a larger group, but that's all I have for right now.
Yeah, Emily, I think that's a good point. I do, and some of this is we're getting into sort of fundamental territory that I think can't be walled off easily from the full EAG session. I think these discussions have gone better if we have something that the credit issues group can mostly agree on for the full group, just because in the full group, it can be really easy to sort of recreate the process of like, how did we get here and what was the conversation in the credit issues group? But I think it's fine if I think the one caveat is not knowing the PUC schedule for asking about front loading, but this is reasonably well advanced, and we can take it as is back and just say, we don't feel like we as a credit issues group was able to fully recommend it, but let's talk about this as a larger group and see where people are with that. I think that's an opportunity. Yeah, Emily.
Just in terms of timing, I can't remember what you said about that. So were you hoping to be able to get the EAG to come to some sort of agreement and language to send this off at the next meeting, or were we waiting on the PUC to give us like a deadline that they were hoping to hear from us at a certain time? I'm just kind of curious what you were thinking about timing.
Yeah, I was hoping that if we all felt like we could agree, we could just advance this now to the EAG so we would be ready. I haven't heard a date yet, so we may have more time than we think. I think I last heard, and not to put words in anyone's, but I think Dominic said sometime in like mid-August, and so that definitely can put us in a problem with getting the EAG to be able to sign off on anything, because we have, sort of 2 meetings probably before that happens. It's not impossible. It's just, I think we had a good discussion about this last week where we were generally on the same page, but maybe it was just, we were on the same page that front loading was going to be really challenging. And we didn't get as far into the details of what we thought the PUC should do with that information. So I think it's fine to wait a little bit longer. Yeah, we've had a mixed success with being on top of PUC requests for information and getting it through the full EAG. But yeah, unless there's any questions, we could take public comment and table this. Does anyone else want any other front loading discussions?
I mean, I was just going to throw in there that, Emily brought up the benefits. I think, again, this paragraph here that's highlighted, talking about increasing the delivered or installed measures, independently of any generic or, delivered measure. I think the benefits of an installed measure are quite clear. It's something that brings value to someone's home. Like, the easy example, of course, is heat pump. That's you're bringing value to that person's home. You are, you're increasing the comfort, the psychological benefits of having like a new piece of heating equipment that is efficient and not, potentially harmful or dangerous with, in the case of, let's say, a low-income household that's having a heat pump installed, replacing an old boiler or furnace system that, maybe has issues with, health and safety. So, a delivered fuel, is burned and produces heat and keeps the house warm. But of course, there's a whole number of benefits that don't come along with, just a simple, gallon of heating fuel. So I think that's, I think the benefits of delivering or having more installed measures go to low-income homes is really quite obvious. But so that would be the reason why we'd want to suggest that, I think, because it would further benefit low and moderate income folks that have more efficient heating appliances and weatherization done to their home. But yeah, I guess, to what extent do we, we can, I think recommending it from that perspective, like I just laid out there, is an obvious recommendation from an equity perspective. Obviously that's the more heat pumps we can get to, low-income folks, the better. But then, Matt does raise a very good point, a very pragmatic, real world example of like, how is this actually going to affect the folks installing these measures? So, and I'm not sure that it's really our task to, while that is a very important consideration, I don't know how much we need to consider that necessarily if we're keeping a strictly equity lens on this. You know, I don't know how much that necessarily should be considered. You know, I think if a requirement was made, I think that's, you know, that would be the requirement to serve those low income folks. So yeah, that it's a complex topic for sure. And I like what you said, Mia, about, you know, this is kind of this is the playing field we've been given, and we're operating in that under those circumstances. So we're kind of, it's the hand we've been dealt, so to speak. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents on the benefits. You know, I mean, it's very yeah, installed measures are more beneficial than delivered fuel, for sure.
And we can try to get consensus with that within the larger group about they feel value. And you know, I'll just note that this was the PUC could think about it, and it's something that they may not have otherwise considered, although I might not be giving them enough credit for being creative on ways you could do front loading without stressing the market, but there's a lot of unknowns. So Emily, Matt, if you don't have anything to add, I'll move to quick public comment. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And so yeah, if anyone wants to give public comment, ideally about this, we can do more public comment at the end, but ideally on front loading LMI credits, I think would add the most to the discussion at this time. So if anyone wants to speak, please raise your hand or unmute if you're on the phone. Okay, going once, going twice. Okay, we'll do more public comment later. So the next thing on our agenda that we talked about was the DDA. I think we had, I'm just going to get sort of my notes up that I created for the group. Just bear with me. Okay. So yeah, just one second. Okay, so this is again just really the start of a memo that I set up based on you know, things we had discussed in the prior meeting, and I think we had a discussion basically that the PUC is in process of creating various, you know, guidance for potential DDAs, default delivery agents, and you know, some of that has already come up with the discussions about obligations, but I understand that there will be an RFI and an RFP that we thought from an equity perspective we could encourage the commission to look sort of more closely at the potential DDAs qualifications and serving the households that we're more concerned about. So in this memo, I basically said that, you know, we know the DDA is going to be disproportionately producing a lot of the, or serving a lot of the populations that are going to be impacted by the clean heat standard. And so we had talked about asking the commission to include information on proposals for the DDA that include a description of and the entity's experience. Well, this is a weird way of putting it. Sorry, I'm just noticing a typo. So we encourage the commission to ask that proposals for the DDA include the description, the entity's experience with, and plan for serving the following groups. And those were renters, low-income households, moderate-income households, manufactured homes, households living in older homes, and households with limited English proficiency. And those are basically have been fed from the EAG's larger discussions about impacts to those groups. And then we also added, or I added an idea that, you know, to support equity in general, DDAs should have a DEI plan or some sort of existing institutional framework that guides equity in their organizations, because we know they're going to be playing such an outside role in producing this. And then, you know, there were some other, so I think the things that we haven't really fleshed out were under these specific groups. I noted some things that we had asked about the organization's experience with. And then we had some other discussions about like how the PUC should think about multiple DDAs along these domains, how the DDA could work with the WAP program, and you know, the DDA may be responsible for large portions of those LMI credits. And I think those are all important, but I don't know that that's sort of something you can put in an RFI or an RFP. But yeah, I guess from all of you, I'd love to know, like, do we want to flesh out these questions or other things that we think that the commission should ask potential DDA candidates to come prepared to, you know, discuss about sort of these equity issues? So any way we can actually, I think, add value to the process rather than just, as we've discussed, add complexity. So I don't know if you have any thoughts, all of you.
All of these things, you know, having a potential DDA candidate, you know, basically address each of these, you know, or some form of each of these categories would be very helpful, because, you know, I think the stuff you have down at the bottom there with not yet incorporated, you know, of course, I think that any DDA that is, you know, applying to be a DDA in Vermont will be very aware of the weatherization assistance program. If they're not, then that would probably be a red flag.
Yeah.
But you know, with regard to low-income households, you know, the weatherization assistance program is going to, of course, serves them only low-income households. Low-income households, they have a broader definition of low-income households, all 80% AMI and lower, whereas in Queen Eat Standard statute, it's 60% AMI and below. But yeah, basically, I think these are all very important, because it's the DDA, I think, you know, short of the weatherization assistance program being a DDA themselves, which I think Jeff Wilcox and others have indicated they're not interested in doing. You know, I think that they're going to be the primary provider of those credits onto the market via, you know, by doing basically by dealing with the weatherization program. So the DDA will be collecting obligated party, you know, funds, you know, to fulfill the obligated parties' low and moderate income credit, you know, their requirement, and then essentially buying, you know, or having transactions with the weatherization program for all of their weatherization heat pump installs, because they install, you know, heat pump water heaters, cold climate heat pumps, and do weatherization work, of course. So I think that they need to be basically aware of what the landscape looks like for, you know, where these low-income credits are going to come from. You know, it'd be nice if there was some additional low-income credits created outside of the weatherization program. There certainly will be, but to I think you know, to a much a lower extent than what's coming out of being produced by the weatherization program. At least in terms of carbon reduction. You know, we know that the energy efficiency utilities in Vermont, you know, they do serve low-income populations, but largely, you know, to looking at past data of, you know, number of homes weatherized, for example, you know, they do good work. However, it's just considering that their programs serve a wider swath of the population other than low income, you know, the minority of their programs are in low income in specifically. So yeah, I think that definitely, you know, under the low-income households category, we could probably suggest some language to the effect of, like, you know, what's your experience serving low-income households, and, like, you know, if you were, you know, essentially given the if you did become the DDA, like, basically what would be your plan to acquire those credits? And then, you know, I think the answer from such an applicant would be illuminating as to how they plan to meet their goal there. Because there is going to, you know, let's say in a situation where the weatherization assistance program, you know, essentially they have, you know, X amount of credits available for that year. They're all purchased by the DDA, and there's still a demand left over from the obligated parties, you know, needing to meet their statutory low income requirement. There's going to be a gap there. So there's going to need to be some expertise on behalf of the DDA to potentially create those credits themselves.
Yeah, and I think there is a chance that, like, I don't know how to work out, like, what if someone else, an obligated party or someone representing like a coalition of obligated parties, offers more for the WAP credits than the DDA, and then the DDA sort of has to come up with a side source. I mean, some of this gets into sort of like, what is your business plan, that I don't want to like, I think that's kind of the side question of the sort of PUC being able to frame what they want the DDA to do, that I don't know that we as an EAG add much value, but I do, like, I don't know that the commission is necessarily going to ask about, have you served manufactured homes and things like that. Like, those are the types of things that I'd like them to ask, because I think that's specific, and it might not get that granular in asking for proposals, but like, I think they're going to be really important. So I don't know. I don't want to overcomplicate this. So only where we think we should add value. Yeah, Matt.
I don't know if this adds value, but I think it reiterates what I understand to be true in the law, which is that the DDA be a statewide agency. I think a real fear out there that we can easily alleviate, because I think we were reinforcing the law, is that a DDA can't be a local coalition nonprofit comprised of obligated parties that would just focus all the credits in one geographic area of Vermont. That is the worst fear. And I think if we can reinforce the fact that the DDA should be someone who's capable of delivering services statewide, and not, for instance, say just in like 1.5 mile stretch in Chittenden County, I think is really important.
And I think we discussed this like really briefly last time, but does anyone remember in Act 18 if it says that, so I think we talked about that the if there's more than one DDA, it may be very sector specific. But does Act 18 say that they have to be statewide, or does anyone know? It does say that?
It does indicate that they need to be statewide. Yes, that's.
Okay.
I
think
don't have the exact language in front of me, but yeah, that's. Yes, I think it says one or more statewide entities. I believe it is the word.
Yeah, I think it's important to reinforce that, because I think you could make a DDA bidder could make the plausible argument, well, we have the capacity to go statewide, but we're going to focus right now, just say, for instance, on this one plant that runs a steam pipe up to a hospital. And we don't want that to happen at all. That would be the most inequitable thing that could happen. So I think the value that we add as the EAG is to ensure that someone living in Bellows Falls has equal access to those credits than a hospital on a hill.
Well, why don't I add something for this? It's hard to do it live, but I can just say, you know, the statewide experience and maybe strategy for serving, you know, the entire state, including rural areas. I think, because we've talked briefly about rural areas, and I think that's another concern. So, yeah, how about I put something that I think speaks to that after this meeting, and then we'll bring that forward to the whole group. Yeah, I think it's a good point. Even if the Act 18 says it, and kind of what we said for all of these, like we know you have to do it, but like, do you have experience doing it? I think is relevant for the PUC to consider. So yeah, that makes sense. So I will put that in our thing. Okay. So yeah, I think.
I was just gonna say that's a great point that Matt just made. You know, I think that's so a broader suggestions or from the EAG, you know, in this specific, like when talking about, you know, suggestions for essentially interview questions for a DDA, I think that would be a great one. Because, you know, historically, as somebody who grew up in Southern Vermont, you know, we know that, you know, Chittenden County's benefited greatly from a lot of different things over the years that, you know, folks in rural Windham County have not. And so we want to ensure that this is really an equitable, geographically equitable. So.
And then maybe, oh, thanks for sticking the DDA agent language in the chat, Emily, by the way. Yeah, statewide, let's see, statewide entities. So yeah, I think it is clear, but helpful to reiterate that, like, you can't just say you're a statewide entity. I think that makes sense. And then I was thinking, one thing that might be good for us to add in this is to say, like, you know, something to the fact that, like, we recognize that the DDAs could be sector specific, but then if that's the case, the PUC should make sure that there are any gaps in someone who has like the ability to serve manufactured homes. Because for that one, for instance, would be a pretty comparatively easy one to just not do, essentially. So I think that would be helpful to say, you know, if sector specific, sorry, specific, make sure there are no sector gaps. Okay. So I'll put that in language, but I think that's something we can agree on, that, there has to be an identification that there's a reasonable likelihood that all those groups can be served by whatever DDAs are ultimately chosen.
And I mean, we also know that a disproportionate number of low-income folks live in mobile homes or manufactured homes. So I do find, I think it would be difficult to serve the low-income population without serving folks who live in manufactured homes. You'd have to probably try to avoid them at that point, I think.
I think people will, honestly. It's just, we know it's harder to do heat pumps and weatherization, and it's just so specific. I don't know. I think people actively would avoid those groups if they're not the WAP program that's already obligated to serve those households, or have experience in programs already there, I think.
It's true. Yeah, I mean, you make a good point, because plumbing, heating, electrical in manufactured homes is totally different than a stick-built home. So you do need a certain amount of expertise, and I don't even know if I'd call it expertise. I guess just, it's one of those things that you can be an electrician and know what you're doing, but when you get into a mobile home, it's it takes probably a little bit to get oriented with what you're working with in that instance. So it's a good point.
Yeah, I think that's just why the PUC's got to prioritize, depending on who applies, but like they've got to prioritize people who have experience doing the work, on the ground level, or like plausible ways to do that, I guess,
Yeah.
Okay, so sort of under this not yet incorporated, I mean, based on our discussion so far, that sort of seems a little bit more the overall PUC DDA sort of strategy discussions, and maybe not laser focused on equity. Is there anything else that we think like the DDA should be sort of pre-screened for in terms of ability to serve? Just get rid of this.
I mean, I think that what you've noted here, any history or experience, serving the limited English proficiency households, migrant communities, new Americans, that's very important, that those folks don't get overlooked, and that are included in any DDA, actions or activities. We wouldn't want a DDA just not serving those folks because they don't speak the same language, or because they're more difficult to communicate with. I think that would get at, I think having a, like you noted here, like a language access plan, or diversity, equity, inclusion plan in place before becoming the DDA. I think probably we should recommend that be a requirement. I think that would be pretty foundational to any statewide entity that's looking to serve such a broad swath of the population, that if they don't have that plan in place, that would be, I think we should probably suggest that be a requirement.
Yeah, we can do that.
I think that's not that outside the box of an ask. That's pretty, I think in this day and age, that's pretty standard, should be. Yeah.
But yeah, I think to Matt's point, like, I don't think it's going to be easy to develop these competencies overnight. And I think if you haven't sort of been independently working along these tracks, like having a DEI, like, have you thought about this at all? Like, I do think it is a bad sign for the organization's ability to carry out the activities in general if they haven't sort of done this sort of basic organizational stuff to consider equity and how they're going to reach disadvantaged communities.
And just the other point I would make is that this is a bidding process, one would assume. I mean, the PUC hasn't quite set it out, but yeah, there needs to be, like, just like there is in anything, a test of whether or not they have the capacity, because obviously anyone can come in with a low bid and underperform, and we don't want that. So I don't know how the PUC does it. I don't even know how EAG would suggest, or myself personally would suggest they do that. But my worst fear is that someone comes in and says, yeah, I can, the other organization thinks they can do it for X, we can do it for half that amount. And then they screw it up. The burden becomes even higher. in order to meet the Global Warming Solutions Act mandates, and fees get all blown out. That's what I fear
I
with
think
the
that
DDA if they pick wrong.
yeah, and we're kind of pointing out the hardest things to do. So if that is not part of their plan, then yeah, I think there's probably cracks in the foundation if you have no plan for serving these groups. Yeah, I think it'll be illuminating for their capacity in general, not just disadvantaged communities. Okay, so I think this seems good. I mean, it's not super dense, but we don't want to add more than is actually valuable, and just create requirements that don't do anything. I think it's possible that other EAG members will have sort of specific questions they want the DDA candidate to tackle on these specific groups, beyond explaining your experience in general. So unless there's any other EAG thoughts, I think this isn't a good place to take back to the full EAG and ask them for other things that they'd like the DDA to be, capable of talking about. Any other last EAG comments? And I'll open it up to public comment. Okay, hearing none. Is there any public comment, preferably about DDA qualifications that anyone on the public would like to share?
Hello, I'm John McCormick.
Hi, John, we can hear you. Yep.
Thank you. Regarding the low-income manufactured homes, mobile homes that are not going to be attractive to those who are installing, regardless, those residents of the mobile home, the manufactured home, are going to be paying for the next 25 years their share of what could be the $17 billion clean heat standard. I mean, I believe that would likely be the case, that they would not be attractive. Richard Coward essentially said, look, they're kind of a drag on the program, aren't they? Does anyone have any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, this has been, I think, in the main EAG discussions, a real point of concern. I think we're going to be delving into manufactured home issues more specifically in the coming weeks on our work plan. But yeah, absolutely. I would say that my initial reaction is that I think the clean heat standard itself is going to be a tough framework to do that, and it's going to require sort of equivalent investment in the state to assist with manufactured homes as a whole, rather than just assuming a credit marketplace will just sort of take care of it. That's sort of my initial reaction, but it's a big concern of the EAG and something that we have and will continue to discuss. I don't know, Ben, Matt, Emily, if you have any thoughts on that?
Nothing additional to what you just said at the moment.
Yeah, Matt, anything? No?
Yeah, I mean, this is the number we're waiting for. We don't think that there's going to be a fee that will raise $17 billion. We just think that there needs to be somewhere enough economic activity. And once we find out what the fee will be, we'll find out whether or not it's regressive or affordable. And we're all just sort of in a holding pattern until we have a better idea of how much all this is going to cost. And while we did have a big number, we didn't have definition on what it all will mean for the average user of fossil fuel.
And we can get
That'll
to
that'll be forthcoming, yeah, in the future drafts, of course.
Yeah.
John McCormick, John, do I have another moment, or?
Rick, did you want to talk about that, or was there another public comment?
I wanted to continue the discussion we just had.
Okay. Yeah, we can continue the discussion. Yep.
Right. The Weatherization Assistance Program is a premier designated delivery agent. It is highly efficient. It in the last 2 years, we'll have weatherized 2,700 homes, including even installing heat pumps. If we increase that fee to 4 or 6 or 8 cents per gallon, we would be providing Weatherization Assistance Program with enough capital to even go into the lower median income bracket. and that would require some legislation, but that could happen if you extend WAP, increase the salaries of the workers by $10, allow WAP to go into the lower median income stratum, right? Good God, it use what we've got, but we're creating something that, you know, these ideas that you all have don't necessarily mean they're going to become a reg. End of comment. We've got to think about an alternative, because Matt said it's terrible to have given you folks the responsibility to make this thing equitable. And you've already heard from Mr. Giddings, it's not equitable.
Thanks,
Thank
John.
you.
Yeah, I think as we've kind of grappled with, there are really big foundational questions in the clean heat standard that I don't know that our EAG group is particularly well equipped or charged with discussing. And I think we can raise our concerns. We have and we will. My concern is that if the clean heat standard sort of stands, if it's passed, I want to make sure that the EAG has grappled with it and made as much recommendations within the existing framework and for companion legislation as possible. I think we do a real disservice just saying it's bad and assuming it doesn't happen. I think we miss some opportunities. So I think it's my goal for the EAG to be as comprehensive both within and outside the EAG to come up with equitable solutions, because we just ultimately don't have final say on how this is going or what will happen. That's my personal philosophy of how we need to tackle this, but other EAG members have different takes on this, and I'll hand it over to Matt to say his.
I just want to say that was very well said. I agree. We have to behave and act as responsible EAG members as if this is going to become law, even if we privately or publicly think it would be a bad idea. That is what I'm going to do, and I really appreciate you saying that, Mia, because I honestly believe that's what you're doing, and that's what most of us are trying to do.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a good point, and I think John has a good point. Like we can't lose sight of the larger picture that there are huge cost implications. I just think we should be as thorough as possible and explore everything that's on the table to make sure we've given the best advice possible. But we take your point. Thanks for continuing to participate in this. Yeah, always appreciate your comments. So.
And I appreciate your comments as well, Mia. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Rick, I don't know if you had something else or wanted to jump back in. Okay, thanks. Okay, so if I'm not hearing any more public comments, we can do one more at the end. The rest of the time is available to discuss sort of whatever we want. There have been a lot of comments recently in response to obligations, comments that were asked for by the commission, and then there also are the draft potential study. I think both of those impact the group, but the credit issues group, but there's no like direct ask for us to tackle. So I don't know if anyone has anything they want to talk about with that.
As they relate to credit issues, I guess. Well, I can say quickly about the potential study. Obviously, we solicited feedback from the technical advisory group last week. We did receive some feedback, and we're taking that into consideration. The cost numbers that were presented were very, initial draft, and will be revised moving forward based on a number of public feedback that we got. The cost numbers will, basically don't read too much into it, because they, as we speak, are being revised, in a way that will result in the cost that was presented last week decreasing. So, based on the greenhouse gas emissions inventory being updated and a number of other factors. So.
One thing that I don't expect to change that I'm concerned about from an EAG perspective is, weatherization seems to be, kind of a low value item, or I don't know how to characterize it, a low credit producing item relative to other items. I don't think that's a big surprise, but obviously it is going to impact, you know, incentives to get low and moderate income households to be able to weatherize, or, you know, not them personally, but the system to produce more of those activities. I know there's sort of like the sort of weatherization alongside heat pumps, and heat pumps do have a lot of value. So I think some of that could occur naturally is kind of how I've it characterized. But I do think that that sort of issue of which measures, you know, kind of the things we've been discussing, like the value of the greenhouse gas emissions versus the economic value to a household are not necessarily directly aligned. And I think I don't know. I mean, I think in the final report we should point about that. Like, you know, you're assuming that, you know, all these house in the potential study or the draft potential study, assuming that a lot of households will be weatherized, but there's not the greatest market incentives for that to happen. So, I mean, that concerns me. I don't know if there's anything we can do with that information, but I think we should probably note that in our final report that there's not great incentives for that.
I mean, that is also part of the puzzle. You know, obviously it's a massive model that's being input into to produce the results of the potential study. One of the things being revised is the market potential for weatherization.
Okay.
So, you know, we're as a team internally are of course going through the model and figuring out ways that need to be adjusted, you know, to reflect reality better. You know, because after all, you know, there's thousands of assumptions being made, so we're just making sure that those assumptions are accurate. And we did discover that, you know, the market potential for weatherization could be increased relative to what was reported in the initial draft. So that'll be a future revision. So,
that's
but
good.
yeah, nonetheless, you make a great point. You know, so after those revisions, you know, we haven't seen the draft of like, you know, an updated model because it's still being worked on. But you know, so we'll see what that looks like. I think you're probably referring to like the top 10 measures in terms of greenhouse gas reduction potential.
Mhm.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens there. But certainly we do expect the potential greenhouse gas reduction from weatherization in Vermont to likely go up in future iterations of the model. So that's good news. Yeah. So
Yeah, and that's good to know. And I think, yeah, it's difficult to make assumptions before, you know, on sort of preliminary data. So this is a good reminder. I think it'll be interesting to see the final one just because, you know, there's the greenhouse gas potential, and then there's kind of this whole economic picture of what will actually be produced. And I don't know that it goes how well it meshes with the sort of larger policy goals for the state, or like, you know, economic assistance goals we might have for low income households. So there may or may not be kind of a way around that with the numbers. So I think it's something we should return to as part of this group when we see more finalized data.
sorry. Yep. Yeah, and one of the interesting things that'll be interesting to see when we do, you know, get a future more final, you know, for example, in the final draft, what is being modeled too, which is interesting about the study is, you know, given the statutory requirement for low and moderate income households to be served, you know, manufactured homes potential as well as, you know, multifamily buildings, et cetera, that are more like low income specific measures are being modeled as part of this. Whereas, you know, I know future or in past potential studies, those, you know, have not taken into consideration the market potential for example, manufactured homes. And typically a manufactured home, when it is either weatherized or replaced, as you are aware, Mia, you know, the carbon reduction from, you know, retrofitting or replacing a mobile home is quite significant, and of course benefits the you know, the folks that are living there greatly. So definitely excited to see, you know, how that plays into it as well. And, you know, when we again, you know, narrow in the future drafts of the potential study, which of course we'll be doing over the next month, because here we are almost on August, and so we're coming up pretty quick on that. So yeah, TBD, but everyone will see the final results soon enough here. So
Yeah, I'm interested in manufactured home replacement, you know, personally, because my agency is engaged in some of that. But yeah, we also know that there's a decent several thousand manufactured homes that should probably not be weatherized because the investments are not going to make sense. And really that home should be replaced with a more efficient model, but that's extremely expensive for the household. So yeah, I think that's another equity issue we're going to want to flag about. If that's sort of relatively costly and comparatively not economical to produce greenhouse gas reductions, I think that's a real concern that the state needs to invest on that separately
Really.
to get benefits. So yeah, I think we should, as this group, as more versions come, this group should watch it and see sort of what are the recommendations and how do we think that'll actually impact policy for the sort of targeted groups that we're worried about.
Exactly. And yeah, as the model is further refined, assumptions documents and workbooks will become available. So we'll really be able to dive in. But at this point, they are preliminary drafts, not really, they're still, being worked on. So it wouldn't be to have those workbooks and stuff available at, the present might not be the accurate information that we want to send out to the public. So
totally makes sense.
Yep.
Okay, so there's the potential study, there's recent filings. Does anybody have anything else on the related to credit issues that we should tackle today or at a upcoming meeting?
I guess I just wanted to loop us back around to the initial document that we were looking at with the Word doc, the memo that I had created that you had some edits on. I think we should bring that to the full EAG for next meeting. But if we were able to pretty much approve the edits that I thought all the edits you made to it were great. So, I feel comfortable accepting those track changes. To then take that and present it to the full EAG to discuss and hopefully kind of send along to the PC. So
Okay, yeah, I can come up with a clean version, and I think you, as you know, I'm not going to be at the next meeting due to conflict, but I think you can mention the whole discussion we've been having. I think really valuable discussion about feasibility of front loading and the sort of idea about increasing costs and complexity, especially with installed measures. So that's something I think we can get good buy-in from the whole group, and then we can take that back the following week and see if we can see what we need to go with that. So that sounds good.
sure.
Matt, you had something?
Yeah, I just my fault. I haven't done the homework. I'm admitting this, but I think as long as there is a line, and I'd be happy to proffer it up. I just can't do it on the spot here. That explains simplicity is preferable in understanding that we may be adding a layer of complexity through this. I'm just talking of word that I can comfortably sign on to. That requests that desire for simplicity from the installers and the obligated entities, while also understanding simplicity, complexity might be more equitable. I don't know. I'm trying to think of the ways to express that. I'm quite frankly, I'm trying to explain this to the people who are actually going to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I get a lot of blank stares. And so I come here and I try to make it simple, and then I go there and I try to make it simple, and we're not meeting. This is a problem with this policy. It fundamentally is. So, anyways, that's my rant. Thanks for listening.
Okay, yeah. If you said language, yeah.
I was just gonna say I would agree with that. I think simplicity is always better. So, if you have a chance to take a look at the document before we do bring it before the full EAG and have some language you want to throw in there, then we can mull that over. Because I would much prefer to have a document that the whole group can agree on. And I think there is some middle ground. We could have a document that would emphasize simplicity while also emphasizing the need to, serve low-income folks to the greatest extent possible. But I think, they're always, to make this ultimately a successful policy, we do need to have buy-in from the obligated parties, of course. So I think, you make a very good point. So if you do have a chance to look at that document and suggest language, that'd be fantastic, because we'd love to come to a consensus. And I recognize that might be hard given the way it's currently written. So I definitely get that. So but I would be willing to do some wordsmithing and add or remove some stuff that essentially gets, has that same through line, but with your really important observations of what the existing marketplace looks like. So I hear you, basically, is what I'm saying. So I mean, I'll also take some time to look back at it, and if I do say come up with some language prior to the next meeting, what I can do is circulate it amongst the group members here. See what folks think, see where we're at before the meeting next Tuesday.
Yeah, and it's always open meeting law, like there's kind of only so much editing, but I do think we have room for another EAG discussion and one of these discussions before the PUC specifically asks for this, and we could potentially do something off our usual cycle if we need to get this sort of more done, and we could always ask the full EAG to give us advance permission if we're worried it's going to come too fast. So that's my only thing about trying to we're following the open meeting law, not actively collaborating, but if you two individually want to come up with some discussion for Tuesday's meeting, I think that would be great.
Yeah, and just one thing that popped in my head. I think, could we distill it down, Matt, to, I mean, I understand, I can, picture you trying to communicate this complex policy, what already is a complex policy, to the obligated parties, and the folks actually doing the install, and then, having to be like, oh, by the way, we decided to add like XYZ, which is further complexity, and having them, rebut that. So, I mean, would we be able to say, okay, market rate credit, and then right now there's currently 5 of these credit categories proposed. Do you think that we could hit our equity goals by having a market rate as well as a low, and basically combining the moderate and low income credit categories into one? So having a market rate and then a broadly LMI, credit category. So effectively 2 categories.
No, I understand. I understand what you're trying to do. I'm trying to figure out how that complies with the 16% low income. That's you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm trying to figure out how.
Right, because those are distinct in the statute.
Essentially, you can get 16% you can get 32% all low income, or you can get 16% low income and 16% low and moderate income. And
yeah,
my brain hurts.
Yeah. I mean, so I guess this is a good time to kind of tell you how I was thinking about it, and let me know if like that it would be from an obligated party's perspective, like sitting at their desk trying to figure out how they're going to meet their compliance, if it would, make sense to them. I had mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, like, okay, having these different credit categories, and the memo that I drafted there kind of gets at this, is that, if you're figuring out where you're going to get your, acquire your fuel from, and how many you're going to deliver, how much of that fuel, and where your heat pumps are going to, which homes your heat pumps are going to get installed in, whether the low and moderate income. I had the thought that, okay, having a distinct category that says, okay, low income installed, moderate income installed, then, folks, would be able to very distinctly have this category and be like, okay, this is and break out, on paper, these are the low income credits, these are the moderate income credits. And, we know that we typically serve this many low income folks, etc. Do this many jobs for the weatherization program, whatever. Yeah.
So we have had this conversation, and I don't expect everyone to read the 63 pages of, or whatever the number was, that we filed on Monday. But on behalf of the Fuel Dealers Association, we made the point that we can't do that. It's just impossible. We can account for activities after the fact, but to predict what we can do, whether it's where we buy our fuel or where we earn our credits, we can do a look back very easily, but it's impossible to predict forward. So we're suggesting just a reversal of the program in structural design. Again, I don't think this has anything to do with EAG. I don't think I'm not asking for buy-in from the EAG on this. But we are asking the PUC to fundamentally flip the program to go from a prospective gallons and prospective credits to counting gallons and counting credits, so that they both match. It's hard to explain it. I encourage you to read their filing. But we hope to achieve that on Friday. I hope to get buy-in from the PUC, because that would make this workable. The way that we predict where we're going to install heat pumps, where we're going to buy fuel, where we're going to get renewable fuels, what deals we might strike with weatherization people. All that is, as a perspective exercise, is quite frankly a waste of time, because things change in an instant. We don't put together 10-year IRP plans like the electric utilities. We wake up in our kitchen and we make a cup of coffee and we decide whether we're driving to Springfield, Mass or Walpole, New Hampshire. That's just what we do. That's what we've done for 100 years. And that's not going to change even with the clean heat standard. So if you're going to make the clean heat standard work, you need it to respond to that reality and not try to create or replicate what you have right now with electric utilities. And I think we made a strong case, and I'd be surprised if the PUC disagreed with that approach. So in many ways, this discussion, as I said previously, I think it's I think we need to fix the structure, and then I think we solve this riddle.
And Matt, just
I hear you. Yeah.
curiosity, I did read your comments, but I don't know if I got the gist of it. Is this something that the PUC has control over, or is this something that you're asking the PUC to recommend in Act 18 implementation?
Yeah, so I don't know the answer to that, Mia. There's two different schools of thought. One is, yes, they have the regulatory authority to do it without a change in the statute. The other is, as has been discussed at the TAG, which is we can suggest how the rule is crafted, while also suggesting that a change in statute needs to happen in order to accommodate the rule as written. And I don't know what bucket this falls in, one or the other, but it is a complete change in how the PUC straw proposal is on how those credit obligations are determined. And in our argument is, and I don't just think this, I believe it to my core, which is you cannot run a delivered fuels program, credit program like you do electric utilities, because they're fundamentally different industries. And the idea that we can predict with any certainty how many gallons we'll sell, where we'll buy we'll get the gallons, how many credits we'll need, how many will be low and moderate income, how many will be low income, what type of services we'll do, that will change by the hour. I mean, it really does. If one supply port does not have renewable diesel, we will go buy regular oil from somewhere else, and vice versa. Those market dynamics are always in play, and that's a good thing in a competitive environment because it ensures the lowest cost price for that BTU, no matter what it is. In not having that flexibility, not only create cost pressure because of the fees and all the regulatory structure, but you create additional cost pressures because you're stuck into this modality where you said on August 1st of 2026 that you're going to buy this product here. You had to change, or you can't change it because you've already locked in. 26 months go by, and now you pay a compliance fee based on a business decision, or you pay higher prices. It's hard to understand how the PUC could ever operate a program in which fuel companies that make decisions about where to buy their fuel every morning are locked into a 26-month buying program for both credits and fuel. It's just unworkable. So, but that's not to say this whole thing isn't unworkable. There is a path forward, as outlined in our filing, and I'm very hopeful that the PUC will hear it, will understand it, and go, okay, we need to think differently than we do about Joe's fuel truck than we do about Green Mountain Power, and they should. But hopefully, we'll get there.
Appreciate the explanation. Yeah, I read the filing, and I definitely hear you. But I guess if the PUC, depending on what they do, the EAG might have to shift gears and figure out what. I guess my next follow-up question would be, and you probably don't have the answer to it right away. You need some thinking on it, but how would you ensure that obligated parties are serving the most vulnerable among us in that model? I fully recognize that it makes perfect sense, how you just explained it. But would there be a way to build a mechanism that would ensure that, okay, understanding the business, how the market works, the program gets adjusted to fit that, that model, and then what mechanism could be put in place to kind of both fit the model and serve the folks that need the help. So yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's something that I'll, be thinking on.
Yeah, if you can't show the math, if you can't predict that you're going to install a heat pump or sell renewable diesel to someone that's LMI, but you can account for it after the fact. And if you can't account for it after the fact, then that fee goes to an entity, a default delivery agent, that is required to do that under the PUC regulation, as in terms of accepting the money and the regulatory regulation under the PUC. That is how I envision this working. And I think we just get the compliance method backwards.
Yeah, this seems still workable from an equity perspective. I can't really comment on the larger schema of it, but like you wouldn't not have to serve low income households under that model. It would just be delayed potentially once they sort of true it up. So I don't think it's a problem. And I do think you still would need these credit categories just because, well, maybe, I mean, I think that's something for us to think about too, because yeah, I mean, my thing that I keep coming back to is we know that the cost of getting a low income credit in general is just going to cost a lot more than the generic credit because it's the most expensive way you could do it. So I do think we're going to need, regardless of sort of whether the sort of orientation is flipped like Matt suggests, I do think there's going to need to be a way to characterize the costs associated with installed versus non-installed measures and how to sort of make that workable in a marketplace in terms of who's buying what.
So let me point out the hole in my argument.
Sure.
But I would argue, but I would say you're going to have this in some form anyway. It's year one. The year one hiccups are I wouldn't want the year one hiccup to have people say, well, we can't do it that way. We have to do it this way, and realize that the original path or the straw proposal path is, in my opinion, unworkable. But if they say, but we have a year one problem. And that's where we butt up against the Global Warming Solutions Act and all the entities out there that are willing to sue the state of Vermont, because we have this hard cap. We got to hit this 2030 number. And if we have a year one problem that delays things by 6 months, perhaps the mathematicians go, yeah, you're not going to hit your number. And then we'll be sacrificing a program to comply with a lawsuit filed over a nice round number. And that's where we sort of get into the where two laws meet, but yet the program is less functional, in my opinion.
Just a thought. I wonder if the basically the framework you laid out here over the last 5 minutes, that I totally get that. I think it does apply a lot to the renewable fuels market and just the fuel market in general. So I wonder if you were able to separate out the fuel market, basically to fit your model, and then have an installed market be essentially separate but follow a different. I mean, it'd be an issue with compliance for sure, but that I'm just kind of opining.
No, I hear you.
No,
I hear what you're saying. But yes, but similar to not knowing where you're going to buy your fuel, whether it's going to be renewable or not, if it's going to be obligated or not, knowing how many heat pumps you can sell, or how many homes you can weatherize, or whether your partner who you're going to acquire credits from can do it. And this is where we sort of get into if all at the end of the day, all we want is the obligated parties just simply to write a check to the default delivery agent, and they take care of 100% of the credits, which absolutely can occur. Fuel dealers do not have to do this. Let's be clear. They can simply pay the compliance fee and not bother. The reason to do this is there's an economic opportunity here, and it's good for the marketplace, it's good for competition and all of that thing. But if we were just wanted that end result, where we don't really want the fuel dealers to sell renewable fuel, we don't really want the fuel dealers to install their own heat pumps, just want the DDA to control it all, then there's a lot simpler way to do this. It really is. It really is. And you've heard John McCormick say it a million times, so I won't repeat it, but there's a lot simpler way to do this. The reason why we're making it complex is because we want the fuel dealers to diversify, to sell renewable fuels and install heat pumps. But if the end result is that it's too complex, so they can't do any of that, well, then why don't we just make it entirely simple?
I do think that there is, I don't know how to think about, like, I think we need to bring an economist in here to talk about like social goods. I think there is something to the idea about encouraging diversification and not going like directly regressive with the fuel tax. I think that has sort of immediate problems. It is simpler that, I mean, like if you're doing like a pros and cons or like a, you know, like a policy analysis, I don't think it's easy for us to know which has the least harms and the most benefits now, beyond the one that we're pursuing, the clean heat standard, is like incredibly complicated. So I don't know. I do get the impulse beyond not just wanting to slap a fuel tax, which is going to sort of directly impact everybody immediately and not encourage diversification, but might be more successful in the long term. So I don't know. I don't think we have a bunch of great choices in front of us that are going to be sort of a clear path forward on what's most equitable and effective. I think it's really hard.
Well said.
Yeah, but you know, we'll keep working with our EAG and the cards we're dealt, as Ben described, and see what we can come up with. I think that's
We digress. Yeah.
yeah. I think, well, no, I think this is helpful. The more we can understand the market, the better we can actually make reasonable suggestions that won't make things worse and make the whole thing less workable. I think there is something, it's worth of us being able to, in a side conversation from the full EAG, to be able to have these free-ranging discussions to inform our recommendations. I think that's helped us on a number of things. So I think that's valuable.
Yeah. And to be clear, you know, if it's we're making recommendations that are not feasible to be implicated or to be actually done by the obligated parties we're asking them to do, then how equitable is that? So yeah, you bring some great points, Matt. It's just you know, how do all these pieces come together to make a program that works? That's the ultimate question. So
okay, well, we'll take one more public comment, but I'll plan on sort of doing, I think, the sort of limited things in the DDA memo and the front loading memo that I think we've agreed on, and then, you know, we'll bring those to the full EAG for a more robust discussion about the direction they'd like to see us move in. So we'll do that. So I will open it up for one last call for public comment. Okay, I'm not hearing any, so I think we can call this conversation to a close. It was a really good discussion and made some progress.
sure.
Thanks, Mia.
Okay, bye
Have a
everybody.
good afternoon.